The wind was heavy with dust as David walked across the barren ground of the strange planet. He had traveled far from the safety of his ship, searching for signs of life, but what he found was nothing like the quiet silence he expected. The skies above burned with streaks of violet clouds, and the ground was cracked as if the world itself had been wounded. Every step he took made the earth crunch beneath his boots, and the silence felt alive, as though something unseen watched him from every shadow. David had faced loneliness before on long missions, but this place carried a different weight, a feeling that he was no longer the hunter, but perhaps the hunted. It was not long before he heard them. The sound was deep and heavy, like stones rolling across a mountain. He turned quickly, and there they stood. Figures not human, taller than any person he had ever seen, their skin gleaming like rough stone, their eyes glowing faint in the strange light of the planet. In front of them stood a beast, a creature towering with muscle and claws, its chest rising with each breath like thunder. Its gaze locked on him, sharp and unblinking, the way predators fix on prey. For a moment David felt his heart strike against his chest, but he did not move. Running would mean he had already accepted his role as prey, and he refused that. The aliens surrounded him, speaking in a language he did not know. Among them was one different from the rest, smaller in height but with clear and sharp eyes. Her presence felt strange to David. She did not look at him as food or weakness, but as something she was trying to understand. She studied him the way a scholar studies a puzzle, and in that moment he realized she was curious, almost fascinated. The beast lowered its head, ready to charge, and the others laughed in deep tones that carried no warmth. David did not flinch. His body was tense, his breath controlled, and his eyes never left the beast's. He knew fear was natural, but he also knew that predators sensed it like blood in water. If he gave them fear, he would lose. So instead, he stood tall, shoulders straight, his gaze burning into the eyes of the monster before him. And something shifted. The beast slowed its advance, tilting its head as if confused. It had faced countless creatures, but never before had prey looked back with fire. There was no surrender in David's face, no collapse of spirit, only the sharp edge of defiance. In that moment, the alien girl's eyes widened. She saw something that words could not capture. It was not muscle, not strength of body, but something deeper. It was will, the fierce drive to fight even when survival seemed impossible. The alien leader barked an order, and the beast stepped back. The hunters were not done. They wanted to see what this human could do when stripped of safety. They led him away from the cracked plains into the wilderness where the ground grew jagged and strange plants twisted upward like claws. They gave him nothing, no weapon, no tool, and left him with only his mind and his will. The beast would be released soon, and he would have to run or die. David stood in the silence of the wild, breathing slowly. His thoughts drifted to earth, to the blue skies and the forests where he once walked as a boy. He remembered his father's words long ago, telling him that survival was not only about strength, but about never giving up when every voice around you told you to fall. That memory was a spark, and he carried it now like a flame in his chest. Night fell quickly, and with it came sounds of distant creatures. David moved carefully, gathering what he could from the strange world. He tested the branches of alien plants, broke stones against one another, searched for sharp edges that might become a blade. Every movement was deliberate. He knew the beast was near, and he knew the hunters watched. They expected him to stumble, to cower, but he would not. He was human, and humans did not bow to fear. Hours passed, and the sky turned darker, glowing, faint with distant stars. Then came the sound, low and heavy, each step shaking the ground. The beast was coming. David pressed his hand against the rough edge of stone he had shaped into a crude weapon. His breath was steady, his eyes sharp. He could hear the laughter of the hunters echoing through the night, waiting for him to fail. But he would not give them that. He stepped into the shadows of the jagged rocks, waiting, ready to face what they believed was his end. The beast appeared at last, its eyes glowing in the darkness, its teeth bared. It moved with power and certainty, but as it locked eyes with David, it paused again. That same fire was still there, burning brighter now than before. The human did not run. He stood as if carved from stone, ready to fight even if the fight would cost him everything. For the beast, it was a moment of hesitation. Something it had never felt before. For the alien girl watching from the shadows, it was a moment of revelation. She whispered to herself words her people had long forgotten, words of respect for a spirit that refused to be broken. And in the heart of the wild night, as predator and prey faced one another, the story of fire began. The night on that strange world was long and restless. The stars shone through a violet sky, and the shadows of jagged stone stretched like claws across the ground. David moved silently among the rocks, his body tense but his mind sharp. He knew the alien hunters were watching him, waiting for him to break. He could almost feel their eyes upon him, as though the darkness itself carried their gaze. Somewhere behind that veil of night, the beast prowled, a creature born of power and instinct. And soon it would strike. David's heart was steady, not because he felt no fear, but because he had learned long ago that fear was a tool. It could cripple, or it could sharpen, and he chose the second. Every sound of shifting stone, every breath of wind, every faint growl in the distance told him something. He crouched low, testing the soil, studying the strange plants that twisted upward from the cracks. Their branches were brittle but sharp, their roots tangled in the ground like nets. He began to pull and gather, shaping them into traps that might slow the beast. Far away on a rise of stone, the alien hunters watched. Their voices rumbled in tones of amusement, convinced that this small human would collapse before the night ended. To them, he was only prey, flesh and blood meant to run and die. But among them, the alien girl stood silent. Her eyes followed his movements carefully, noting the way he bent branches, the way he scraped stones for edges, the way he moved with purpose instead of panic. She had seen many creatures face the beast before, and they had all run blindly, but this one was different. He did not run. He prepared. The beast itself moved through the wild with terrifying grace. Its step shook the earth, yet it was no clumsy predator. It circled, waiting for the right moment to strike. Its breath was heavy, its jaws lined with teeth meant for tearing. Yet in the back of its mind, a strange memory lingered, the moment when it had locked eyes with the human and found no fear there. That look had unsettled it. For the first time in countless hunts, the beast wondered if this was truly prey. David finished his first trap near a cluster of jagged rocks. He had woven brittle branches into a snare that would crack beneath weight, sharp enough to wound, but not to kill. It was a beginning, a way to remind the beast that even prey could fight back. He crouched behind the stones, gripping a shard of rock shaped into a blade, and listened. The night broke with a roar. The beast came charging from the shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on him. The ground trembled beneath its weight as it struck forward with a fury that seemed unstoppable. David did not move until the last moment. When the beast's foot slammed into the hidden snare, the branches cracked upward, piercing into its flesh. The creature roared again, not in triumph but in pain. It stumbled, only for a moment, but that moment was enough. David leapt from his cover, swinging the sharpened stone toward its side. The blade scraped against thick hide, drawing only a shallow wound, but the strike carried meaning. The alien hunters roared with laughter from the cliffs above, surprised but entertained. No prey had ever dared to wound their beast. But the alien girl's eyes widened. She saw not a desperate man, but a fighter who refused to kneel. The beast swung its massive arm, and David was thrown across the ground, his body crashing against the stones. Pain surged through him, sharp and burning, but he pushed himself up, coughing and gasping, his eyes never leaving the beast. The creature advanced again, blood dripping from its leg where the branches had pierced, rage burning in its gaze. David stood once more, his body trembling but his stance unbroken. He raised the shard of stone, knowing it would never be enough, but refusing to give in. The hunters grew silent. They expected fear, they expected surrender, but what they saw was defiance. The girl whispered softly in her own tongue, words of disbelief. This man, this fragile human, carried himself like a predator. The beast circled, more cautious now, studying the man as if uncertain. Its instincts screamed that this should be prey, yet the fire in his eyes told a different story. It lunged again, and David rolled aside, driving another stone trap into its leg. Another roar, another wound. Shallow but real. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his spirit only grew stronger. Each strike, each wound, each refusal to run, whispered a truth louder than any words. Humans were not prey. As the night stretched on, David's body became battered and worn. Cuts lined his arms, bruises marked his ribs, yet his eyes never dimmed. The beast began to slow, its breathing heavy, its rage now mixed with confusion. The girl watching could no longer hide the astonishment on her face. She turned to the leader of the hunters and asked in a voice steady but quiet if they could not see what was before them. This was no prey, she said. This was something else, something that carried the fire of survival that even their beast had never faced. The leader only growled, unwilling to admit weakness. To him, all things outside their kind were lesser. Yet in the silence between their words, he too felt a weight pressing in his chest. He had seen that fire once before in the eyes of warriors of his own people, and now he saw it burning in the eyes of a fragile human who refused to bow. David stood in the shadow of the beast, both of them wounded, both of them breathing heavy. The man knew he could not fight forever. His body would break long before the beast's strength ran out. But his spirit was unbroken, and that was the one thing no blade or claw could destroy. He raised his stone once more, and the beast paused, watching him, not with hunger now, but with something closer to respect. And as the second night on the alien world closed in, the hunters, the beast, and even the alien girl knew that this was no ordinary contest of predator and prey. It was something more, something that would change the way they saw the human forever. The dawn rose slow and heavy across the alien sky, painting the horizon in shades of violet and silver. The wilderness carried the silence of exhaustion, for both man and beast had fought through the endless night. David's body ached with every movement, his muscles screaming with pain, but his spirit was sharper than ever. He knew the beast was still out there, circling, watching, waiting for the moment when his strength would finally give way. Yet as his hand tightened around the stone blade he had shaped, his eyes remained steady. He would not let them dim, no. Matter how broken his body became, the alien hunters gathered once more upon the cliffs above, their eyes glowing faint in the light of morning. They expected to find a broken man crawling across the earth, but instead they saw him standing tall among the jagged rocks, his shoulders bent but unyielding. Murmurs spread among them, disbelief cutting through their pride. No creature had lasted so long against their beast. The girl among them did not speak, but her silence carried weight, for her gaze remained fixed on the human below with something close to awe. The beast emerged from the shadows, its body scarred with the shallow wounds David had given it. Its leg carried the marks of his traps. Its side bore the scratch of his stone blade, yet its strength was not gone. It moved with heavy power, each step shaking the ground, its breath steaming in the cool morning air. Its eyes locked onto David, not with the hunger of a predator for prey, but with the sharp awareness of one hunter recognizing another. David did not run. He planted his feet firmly on the ground, raising the shard of stone, though he knew could never match the beast's claws. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his mind recalling every lesson of survival he had ever learned, every voice of those who had told him never to surrender, never to give up no matter how dark the night became. In his gaze there was no fear, only the fire that burned deeper the closer death came. The alien girl whispered to herself words her people had long forgotten. She said that fire was not born of power but of will, and that will could turn even the smallest creature into a predator. The leader of the hunters heard her but gave no answer, though in his heart he too felt unease, for the fire he saw in the human's eyes reminded him of ancient battles his kind had once fought. The beast charged, its roar shaking the sky. Dust rose around its feet as it thundered forward, claws raised to strike. David moved not with panic but with precision. He darted to the side, rolling over the rough stones, driving his blade into the beast's shoulder as it passed. The wound was small, yet it drew blood, and that blood was proof that he could stand against it. The creature swung back, catching David across the chest with a heavy strike that sent him sprawling to the ground. Pain ripped through him, but still his hand clutched the blade. Still his eyes burned. He rose again, body trembling but spirit unbroken. The beast snarled, its jaws snapping, but it hesitated once more as it met that gaze. It was a gaze it had only seen in its own kind, a gaze of one who refused to bow, one who fought not for victory but for the right to exist. The hunters above fell silent. They had laughed before, certain of the human's defeat, but now not a sound came from them. They watched with wide eyes as the fragile figure below defied the beast again and again. The girl's heart raced, her chest rising with breath she did not realize she held, for she had never witnessed such a thing. She had studied countless species, measured their strength and weakness, but never had she seen one stand against death itself with such relentless defiance. David pressed forward, weaving between strikes, his body moving with instinct more than thought. He drove his blade into the beast's flesh again and again. Shallow wounds, but wounds nonetheless, reminders that he was not prey. His own blood stained the ground, yet he did not fall. He thought of earth, of forests and rivers, of the sun that warmed his face as a child, of the voices of his people who had endured storms, wars, and endless struggle, and he knew he carried them all within him. He was not fighting only for himself but for the spirit of humankind, the unbreakable will that had carried his kind across oceans, mountains, and now the stars. The beast staggered, its rage turning to frustration, its eyes narrowing in confusion. It roared again, but there was doubt in its sound, doubt born of something it had never felt before: respect. The fire in the man's eyes did not fade, even when blood poured from his wounds. That fire grew brighter, feeding on pain, burning against the weight of the world. The girl could no longer remain silent. She spoke to the leader, her voice sharp and certain, saying that they could no longer deny what stood before them. This human was no prey. He carried the spirit of a predator, not of the body but of the soul, a fire so fierce even their beast could not extinguish it. The leader growled, unwilling to accept her words, but deep inside he too knew she spoke the truth. Faced the beast one last time that morning. Both stood wounded, both stood weary, yet neither bowed. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, an ancient language of predators locked in a test of will. Slowly, the beast lowered its head, not in defeat but in acknowledgement. David raised his chin, breathing ragged, his body near collapse, but his spirit blazing. For the hunters, it was a moment that shattered belief. For the girl, it was a revelation that shook her to the core. And for David, It was the proof he had always known humans were not made to be prey. They were made to fight, to endure, and to stand unbroken before any predator, no matter how fierce. The story of man and beast was no longer about survival. It was about recognition. The human had shown the fire in his eyes, and even the beast could not look away. The sun climbed higher above the jagged cliffs, spilling pale light across the strange world. Dust hung heavy in the air, carrying the scent of blood and stone. David stood trembling in the shadow of the beast, his chest heaving, his body scarred and battered, yet still upright. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs, but his eyes carried a flame that no wound could dim. Across from him, the beast shifted its weight, its body powerful, yet no longer certain. It had hunted countless creatures, had broken them with tooth and claw, but this human refused to break, and that refusal struck deeper than any blade. From the cliffs, the alien hunters watched in silence. The laughter that once rolled like thunder had faded, replaced by unease. They had expected a swift hunt, a show of dominance, but what unfolded before their eyes was something different. The human had not only survived, he had fought back. His traps had wounded, his strikes had drawn blood, and his will had shaken the beast itself. The girl among them felt her pulse race as she leaned forward, unable to tear her gaze away. She had studied life across stars, yet she had never seen a creature so fragile wield defiance so powerfully. The leader of the hunters growled low, unwilling to accept what he saw. To him, humans were small, weak, insignificant compared to their kind. Yet as he stared at the man standing unbroken, his conviction trembled. He remembered old battles when his people had fought for survival, and in the fire of the humans' eyes he saw echoes of his own ancestors. He turned away, unwilling to admit what stirred inside him. The beast roared, shaking the cliffs, and charged once more. Its steps thundered across the ground, its claws slashing forward with furious power. David braced himself, his legs weak but his spirit fierce. He dove aside, dragging his stone blade across the beast's hide. The strike was shallow, but it left a trail of blood. The beast swung back, and David was hurled into the rocks. Pain flared sharp, his vision blurred, but his hand refused to release the blade. He pulled himself up once more, blood trickling down his face, his stance swaying but steady. The alien girl whispered to herself, her voice trembling with awe. She spoke of the fire in his spirit, a fire that could not be measured by strength of muscle. She turned to the others and told them that what they saw was proof that humans were not prey. Some scoffed, others fell quiet, but none could deny the truth unfolding below. David knew he could not match the beast in strength. His body was near its limit, each breath heavy with pain, yet his mind remained sharp. He moved toward the jagged rocks, leading the beast into the narrow path he had studied earlier. The ground was uneven, littered with loose stones, and the walls pressed close. He stumbled deliberately, baiting the beast forward, and when it charged into the passage, its massive frame scraped against the stone. Dust and shards rained down, slowing it just enough. With a cry born not of fear but of fury, David leapt from the side, driving his blade deep into the wounded leg of the beast. The creature roared in agony, stumbling to its knees, its claws thrashing wildly. The ground quaked beneath its weight, but David clung to his strike, twisting the stone deeper. Before being flung back, he rolled across the dirt, gasping for breath, his body trembling with exhaustion, yet his eyes still burned. The hunters erupted in shouts, their voices a storm of disbelief and anger. No prey had ever wounded their beast so deeply. The girl stood tall, her voice rising above them, declaring that the human had proven himself not prey, but rival. The leader snarled, silencing her with a glare, but he could not hide the unease in his gaze. The beast staggered to its feet, bleeding heavily, its eyes fixed on David with something more than rage. For the first time in its life, it saw an equal standing before it. Its roar was no longer one of hunger, but of recognition, a cry that shook the cliffs and silenced the hunters. It lowered its head slightly, its eyes never leaving the man who had refused to break. David stood swaying, his chest rising and falling like the tide, his blade still in hand though his strength was nearly gone. He looked at the beast and saw not only a monster but a reflection of struggle, of survival, of the endless fight to endure. He knew he could not strike again. His body would fail him, but his spirit had already won. The girl stepped forward from the ranks of hunters, her voice firm though her heart pounded. She declared that the trial was finished, that the human had shown more than enough. The leader growled, demanding silence, but his words carried no weight, for even the beast itself seemed to agree. It no longer pressed the attack. Instead, it bowed its massive head, blood dripping into the dust, a gesture of respect to the man who had stood against it, without fear. The silence stretched long. The hunters shifted uneasily, their pride wounded by what they had witnessed. To admit the human strength was to admit that their own beliefs of superiority were flawed. Yet none could deny the truth that burned before their eyes. The girl's words rang clear in the silence, that the human carried the fire of a true predator, not born of claw or fang, but of will, and that fire was more dangerous than any weapon. David leaned against the rocks, his body trembling, his vision dim, but his spirit blazed brighter than ever. He had faced the beast and survived, not through strength, but through defiance. And in that moment, predator and prey became equals. The turning point had come, and the story of the human was no longer one of survival. It was one of recognition, of respect, and of the fire that even the greatest beast could not extinguish. The sky above the alien world carried a strange calm. The storm of the hunt was over, and the silence that followed was heavier than any roar. David stood weak but unbroken, his body marked with cuts and bruises, his chest rising and falling like a warrior who had given everything yet refused to fall. Across from him the beast stood with blood dripping from its wounds, its great body trembling not with hunger but with respect. Its eyes no longer carried the cold gaze of a hunter. Instead, they burned with recognition, as though it had looked into a mirror and seen not prey but another predator staring back. On the cliffs above, the alien hunters shifted uneasily. Their voices, once filled with cruel laughter, had fallen silent. They had seen their beast hesitate, had seen it bleed, and had seen it lower its head to the fragile creature they once mocked. To admit what they had witnessed was to accept that the human before them had changed the meaning of the hunt forever. Pride battled against truth in their hearts, but none could deny the fire that burned in David's eyes. The girl stepped forward from the ranks of her people. Her voice carried strength that silenced even the leader, who had long tried to deny what unfolded before them. She said that the human had proven something none of their kind had expected, that strength was not only in the body, but in the will that refused to break. She said that fire was rare, a flame that endured even when the flesh was torn, a flame that could not be taught or given, but only carried within. She declared that the human had shown them a spirit that could rival even their greatest predator. The leader growled, his pride wounded, but his eyes betrayed him. He had seen the truth as clearly as the rest. He turned to the beast, expecting it to finish what it had begun. But the creature stood still, its head lowered in silent respect. The leader's anger crumbled, for when even the beast acknowledged the human, no words could deny it. David's legs threatened to give way, but he forced himself to stand tall. His body was broken, yet his eyes still shone with the fire that had carried him through the trial. He looked at the hunters, at the girl, at the beast, and he knew that his fight was finished. He had not only survived, he had earned respect. Girl stepped down from the cliffs and approached him slowly. Her people watched in disbelief as she knelt beside him, her gaze steady. She spoke softly, telling him that he had done what no one believed possible, that he had faced the beast not as prey but as equal. She told him that her people would remember this moment, that the story of the human who carried fire in his eyes would echo through their kind for generations. David gave a faint nod, his strength nearly gone, but in his silence there was pride. He had shown them the truth of what it meant to be human. He had shown that weakness of body could be overcome by the strength of spirit, that fear could be mastered, that will could burn brighter than claws and teeth. He had proven that humanity was not to be dismissed as prey, but to be respected. As hunters among hunters, the beast stepped closer, its heavy form casting a shadow over both man and girl. For a moment, the hunters tensed, unsure of what it would do. But instead of striking, the creature lowered itself until its head nearly touched the ground before David. It was a gesture of honor, a sign of respect from one predator to another. The hunters gasped, their pride shaken to its core, for never before had the beast bowed to any creature. The leader's silence was heavy, his pride broken, but his eyes unwilling to deny what all had seen. Finally he spoke, his voice rough but steady. He declared that the human would walk free, not as prey, but as a fighter who had earned his place. He warned his people that humans were dangerous, that their fire was not to be underestimated. And though his words carried warning, they also carried respect. The girl looked at David once more and whispered that her people would never forget. She told him that even if stars separated their worlds, the story of the fire in his eyes would live on, carried across generations. She told him that he had shown her something she had never understood before, that courage could shine brighter than any weapon. David's body finally gave in, and he sank to the ground, his vision fading. Yet as the darkness closed in, he felt no fear. He knew he had done what he came to do. He had stood against the impossible and had proven that humans carried within them a force no alien could ever truly understand until they faced it. When he awoke, he was back near his ship. His wounds had been treated, his strength still weak but his life intact. The hunters were gone, but carved into the stone nearby were symbols he did not understand, marks left by alien hands. He knew they were not threats, not warnings, but memory. They had left behind the sign of respect, a message that the human's fire would not be forgotten. David rose slowly, the sky above him bright with strange colors, and he felt the weight of what had passed. He had not only survived, but had changed the way another people saw humanity. He had carried the fire of his kind into the heart of a world that wanted him broken, and had left it burning brighter than before. And so the story closed not with defeat, not with silence, but with a truth that would echo through stars, that when humans are tested, when they are cornered, when they are cast as prey, they rise. They fight, they endure. And in their eyes burns a fire that even the fiercest predator cannot extinguish. The beast had seen it. The girl had witnessed it. The hunters had been forced to accept it. Humanity was not weak, not prey, not a shadow to be dismissed. Humanity was predator, forged not of claw and fang, but of will and unyielding spirit. And on that alien world, beneath a sky of violet and silver, the fire of mankind had been written into legend, the end.